So guys, in this video, we're going to be going over some of the things that I found when I was trying to convert this OM606 turbo diesel engine that normally comes with a factory front sump pump, oil pump that is, a front sump pan. I'm converting to a rear sump to fit in my 1965 Ford F100 that I have Crown Vic frame swap. This is a full frame swap. As you can see, definitely not the original I-beam suspension. This is the OM648 oil pan, rocking some diesel pump UK billet goodies, but a lot of guys swap these oil pans off of the OM648 and put them onto their OM606 blocks for fitment issues. So what I found going through this process is there has to be some modifications done if you source your own parts. I'm pretty sure that if you source or if you buy either a Kangaroo's team or a Benz injection conversion kit or a diesel pump UK conversion kit, they will include the correct hardware. But if you sourced all your parts on your own like I did, you may encounter the same issues that I found. First and foremost, let's start off with the hardware. So this is all the hardware that I had pulled off of the original front sump. Now I had to shorten one of these bolts to that bolt down the main pump body. I'll set this over there. There we go. So those big bolts right there, I believe they're M10 or M8, one of the two, or maybe an M12, I don't know. But those main bolts hold down the main body of the pump. I had to shorten this bolt itself because if you look into the block, actually, I take that back. If you are fitting this pump without a special bracket that you make on your own, this is a 1/4 inch thick, you're actually gonna have to shorten 2 of these bolts, because if you look at the block itself, these holes are not through holes, these are blind holes. So if you were to take the factory front sump bolts and send them home, you will most likely crack your block because you'll bottom out, you'll keep on spinning, and it'll either strip the block out or the casting will actually crack. And the reason why you got to shorten these is because the legs on the front sump are much thicker, much taller than the rear sump pump. So you'll actually have to shorten the bolt that goes here and here. This one's no problem. This has a through hole, so the bolt is just gonna go straight down. You won't have any clearance issues. Make sure, you know, anytime you install any parts near your rotating assembly, make sure you spin through, make sure you don't have any clearance issues, but I don't see why that would swing over that far, because if you can see here, it's not coming anywhere close to the bottom deck. So you will have to shorten 2 of these bolts for this mounting location and this one over here. Again, this one should be fine. My case is a little bit different. Unfortunately, the leg off of my pump was either cracked during shipping or cracked during storage. I don't know, but I had to repair mine. I basically took, this is some 1/4 inch steel. I cut it out on my plasma table, my CNC plasma table. And this guy here just supports that little leg. And then I also cut out a piece of mild steel, 3/8. And again, I surface ground both of these surfaces so that everything was nice and flat and parallel, so that when I did my repair, I just took this guy, put him on like that, bolted it together and sandwiched it, and then did my welding. Now the welding wasn't my best welding by any means, but it'll do the job, especially since I've got this support brace on there. I'm not concerned about it. Another thing too, you have to make sure that you have these types of main cap bolts, because as you can see, these are threaded compared to the original style. I would recommend replacing them, but you can flip them as long as you measure the bolts beforehand. Make sure that they're not past the stretch specification. I want to say that if the bolt is longer than 63.5, maybe 64 millimeters, that you have to replace it. I'll throw up that spec right there. But make sure that your main bolts aren't stretched and that you should replace them if they are out of the specification. With that being said, you're gonna also, well, you shouldn't have to move this one. This one should already be there, I believe. But make sure that you've got your mounting locations for here, and then also on your thrust bearing I can't think of the word, but that's all right. So yeah, another thing too that you are going to have to take note of is when you actually take these pumps and you line them up. Now this is roughly where they would sit if they were on top of each other. I don't know if you can see that, but the top pump is the front sump original Mercedes-Benz engine oil pump. This pump shaft, this guy right here, is more so in center or on center with the block, with the crank gear. This one is much further offset. Now, that comes into your oil pump chain, your chain drive. When I was initially fitting my pump, I found that the tension was incredibly too tight, no matter what I did. So what I ended up doing was I went out and I got a oil pump chain for another Mercedes. I don't remember the car off the top of my head, but this is the part number. This is a 24 link, or 24 links if you count them just on one side, but the way that they actually sell these links is they double it. So if you count 24 links, it's actually going to be advertised as a 48 link, and it's a Simple X chain style. The factory OM606 uses a 23 link chain, or 46 link chain. I opted to bump up to a 24 link because if I didn't, I would have to oblong these holes on our mounting surface, or on our actual pump, so that I would be able to shift the pump over far enough to relieve tension. It was a pain in the ass to figure all that out, but I believe that this is the solution that I'm going to go with. One other thing to note about switching from a rear sump, or excuse me, a front sump to a rear sump, is the oil outlet from the front sump is square. Now, the profile of the hole doesn't necessarily matter. The big thing is that you have an O-ring when you reinstall it on the rear sump kit. I don't believe that there's any sort of part number, nor could you fit an O-ring onto the pump when you're if you're reinstalling a front sump. But it's just something to note. Make sure that you get the O-ring. That's this part number right there. And then also replace the O-ring that seals your pickup tube. They're super cheap. Replace them when you got the engine apart, and you should be good to go. So we're going to install this oil pump right now with the 24 link chain. If you are installing just the front sump. This is the part number for the front sump chain. This is a Phoebe Bilstein. Great quality, just wasn't long enough. They do sell a 24 link, or a 48 link, depending on how you're looking at it. But the issue is they don't come completely, one piece. You have to crimp them yourself. If you have the tool, it's not that big of a deal, but I just like to have the chains crimped from the factory. They have the machines that are dedicated to do this, and they put probably a lot more force than the the hand crimping chain tools. So if you can't find this chain for whatever reason, again, you can always go with the self crimp version, but make sure that you have the tool on hand. So I'm going to put time lapse on. We'll get this pump installed, and we'll see how this 24 link version fits. Well, the 24 link, 48 link, however you want to call it, did not work. The chain tension is just way too loose. I don't know if you saw on the time lapse, it's just way too loose. This is way too tight still. So I think I'm left with no other option other than to oblong the holes slightly in the casting to shift this over. I don't love that idea, simply because I already had a problem with it cracking on this leg. But if you were to run this like this, there's been a couple guys that I asked on the Facebook pages that have done this swap before. They've been running it for years, but I really don't like the idea, especially for how expensive and hard to find these pumps are. This puts a tremendous amount of stress on the oil pump drive shaft, and as well as when we do put our oil chain tensioner on, it's just too much. Now, one thing that I am going to check before I oblong these holes is the location of the outlet from our oil pump into our galley. Many guys have done this swap and have done it successfully. I'm probably just overthinking things, but I want to make sure, especially for a critical part like your oil pump that supplies all your oil pressure to all of your critical bearing surfaces, this stuff has to be right. So take your time, figure out the best plan of action so you don't cost yourself more money, or cost yourself parts that are hard to find, at least in the US at the very least. So I'm gonna look at this a little bit closer, and then most likely oblong the mounting holes out a little bit so we can shift this over. I'll show you. I'll loosen these up just a little bit and show you that if you shift it over, you gain more tension, or less tension, sorry. You gain less tension because your gear is further over and in line. It's not a height issue because this pump gear is actually lower than the front sump. But even, we'll undo this one completely. So even just shifting it over, just slightly, and I'm maybe, I don't even know how much, but it's not much at all. The chain tension is already tremendously looser, and this is more of the chain tension that you're looking for your chain tensioner to take up the slack. You don't want it you don't want it as tight as we had it. So I'm gonna get this probably oblonged out. I'll show you how much I take off, and then we'll get this oil pump in. Alrighty guys, so I got the pump test fit with the oblonged holes, because unfortunately we had to go that route with the correct chain. And it seems like we've got great tension now. I threw on my timing chain as well, just to make sure that it was on there before we put the oil pump back on, because I still got to get the head on and everything like that. So that's pretty much all I've had to do in order to fit the OM648 oil pump onto a OM606 pump, or excuse me, an OM606 engine. You may not have the issues that I have. Maybe the castings are just a tiny bit different, a little bit looser, or whatever you want to call it. But everything else lines up. I'm very happy with the fitment now. The chain tension is more adequate for the tensioner to ride on. You know, I'll throw in that video real quick. This chain was completely tight before, so I'm very happy with this. It's not going to put a bunch of strain onto our oil pump drive gear and the journal that rides in. So I'm very happy with this fitment now. So if you have any other questions, I'll be more than happy to answer you in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and just stay tuned for more OM606 content. One last thing to add, when you are swapping over to the rear sump kit, you're going to need some sort of dowel with a slight taper, and you need to plug up your front dipstick tube, because the dipstick tube on the front sump goes in right there on this hole. So you can either turn one down, it's a very slight taper, or you can reach out to Diesel Pump UK, and they sell them as well. I don't think they list them on their website, but you can purchase yours from there, because at the time I didn't have access to a lathe, so I just had to buy the ones that they had, and just put some Loctite. I believe he used Loctite 620 in his video, and then apply it liberally and tap it in there, and you should be good to go.